All right, we'll see if this will work out as I'm hoping it will. Um, I got my Moroccan soccer shirt on. That's this. The flag of Morocco is the Star of Solomon. Solomon, not David. uh, anyway, as the I put up for you a study guide, if you will, for the midterm examination that you'll take this week between, I think it starts at 4 o'clock Tuesday morning and goes all the way through Saturday at midnight. Put it in for Saturday because it's the 4th of July and you can work around things. The discussion boards will go to Monday, and the quiz over feed will be available until midnight Monday as well, so that everybody can have a little July 4th in there amidst a busy week. I'll talk a little bit about the midterm here, but first want to say a few words about feed. Um, M.T. Anderson's still very popular book. It doesn't have the humor, without a doubt, that you find in the Carbon Diaries. Very British humor. Uh, that when you're with your crazy dysfunctional family, and there's a serious time about how uh, the pressures of catastrophe react react or find reflection in families. And it's exaggeration. So don't you know keep smiling and take the humor and the irony that's there. That humor and the insanity, really, the overdrawn characters are part of comedy. Um, Now you don't have them in everything from all the way from Larkin to the dad's going bonkers when because he like everybody else thinks the world as we know it's coming to an end. Feed takes a different tact. We do have um, potty-mouthed little teenagers, so I am not going to make a whole new video about this novel. Um, but there are two videos that I made a couple years ago when I used this text in um, the regular children's lit class. I've been using The Giver lately too, but this novel has. I mean, if you have to remember what M.T. Anderson says, is this. This is what scares him, is that the vocabulary is going down the tubes, uh, and then he's pushing the idea that if we let what the technology can do go too far, this is the possibilities. And we see this coming up even from the whole idea that's implanted in the Hunger Games about security and what are you willing to give up for security. And so everybody's reminded about the possibility of war so that Snow and Coin too can the keep security at a premium. And we see in the end this guy Snowden, the whistleblower, if you will, with through WikiLeaks and whatnot. They're talking about um, what's possible. Um, and Feed, it goes beyond that a bit, obviously, but it's in line with other books that are clearly offering warnings or meditations on a potential problem that exists, maybe the seeds of which exist in contemporary society. Cory Doctorow has two very good books in this area, one and a sequel, much like Carbon Diaries, um, which in this its sequel gives you an international feel, and then you get into where the people are, with the fires and the water wars and the immigration problems. Cory Doctorow's book Little Brother is one, and Homeland, I believe, is the other one. The first one is Little Brother, and in that one, it's all about surveillance and what is actually, what it could happen and what does happen, and the potential for a loss of liberty and things along those lines. Feed is more about the implications of technology. Technology like nuclear weapons are double-edged swords. Any of these kind of new things that come up, cloning, uh, especially with gene manipulation for crops. There's a good side and a bad side to them. It's called these dual-use technologies. And in feed, it takes the jump as in terms of the technology and into the future, where we have something that's called wet wiring. This is a term coined by William Gibson, an eminent science fiction writer. Punk, he does the punk. And that's not what it's called, though. But in necromancer and the kinds of things like that, he developed the notion of cyberspace and council cowboy as well. Um, this is the idea that we become a computer, and in feed, that computer has a biological equivalency, and I mean, a lot of it's not far-fetched. In New York, if with your phone, your smartphone can ring as you're walking by places. And they say, come in here and shop and things like this. This is very much with us now. Um, but the characters are ignorant. And one of the differences you'll find that Titus knows he's ignorant when he's around Violet. And Violet wants, all the things that these other people have living in their uh, communities, pods, because the environment has gotten so nasty. There's the international kind of things that come into play, the haves and the have-nots, and it's been going on for generations, though. So you see that the president of the United States is pretty much as dumb as Link. But these are the dangers, and another one is the kind of a teenage romance that goes on in here, and you always have to remember how young these characters are and their response to these extraordinary situations, especially these eye-opening ones, and the whole idea of lesions and the whole notion of what is the feeding on, and materialism, those kinds of things. That everything good has the potential to go bad. So it's a very strong novel, and you want to be aware of that. Now, and as soon as I put them up, I started thinking, well, I should have done this, I should have done that. There's enough there for you. There are all those prompts I gave you, all the way from the leaders to Rue. You're going to have choices and there are 10 of them in the pool. So when you ring up, and you have to complete that part of the exam in one sitting, you're going to have 5. Each one was going to be a choice. Sometimes it'll be 2 choices from the Hunger Games. More often I'll put in something from Carbon Diaries and the Hunger Games. It might be characters. It could be there are a lot of characters. And, things like tesserae, careers. Now, your response into the prompt area is 6 to 8 sentences minimum. A good, strong paragraph, not just identifying and saying what a tesserae is, or the Thames project, or any of those kinds of. That one would be from. I was trying to think of the name of the water thing that I don't have here, but it's on the thing that's supposed to stop the floods. Now, you have to think not just of what it is, but what is its significance for the novel? What does the tesserae do? Why is it so important that everybody's expecting this thing that was built in '94 and everybody to protect from surges? And they're like the dikes in New Orleans when it comes for a real test. There's failure. Well, what's the whole idea there? And I didn't give the Great Storm. But with the Great Storm is what caused Great Britain, which doesn't have any oil anymore from the North Sea as it's dried up. The Great Storm comes, knocks out power, does all these kinds of things, and this is the catalyst for the novel. This is what causes the situation to become apparent. And you would talk about that in terms of the effect of this giant storm, the Great Storm, calls great for a reason, and Great Britain, much to the chagrin of our snarky little girl, does something it wasn't going to do till 2030, which would be try to reduce the reliance on fossil fuels. And so what you have is sort of like catastrophic change, and dealt with humor. But the idea is that who's ready for this and things along those lines. So it's significant for the novel in those the way it, even if you don't believe in global warming, I mean the novel come and that's what it does. So you want to go and beyond just identifying something. Try to find significance in terms of the big ideas of the novel. Rue or someone would be in terms of what motivates Katniss for all three novels. Um, you know, so be thinking about that in those in the terms of overall significance and not just a description. Now, I gave you last week links to previous exams where prompts were 6 to 8 sentences and with some comments. Now, therefore, things like fairy tales and things you won't know, but you can look at that and see how this works and the directions that you want to take in terms of significance. All these are little arguments, little essays. Um, so you want to, however you're going to do it. There are many different directions you can go in, but what you want one is to talk about the importance, the significance of it, and not just identify it. Why is it important? What does it add to the major ideas of the novel? Those kinds of things are what you want to be thinking about. So read over a few of them. Now, when the test comes up, there are 10 separate questions in the pool. You will respond to 5. When you press, you'll get 5 right there. Each of the ones offers you at least 2 choices. So if you're given 2 prompts like careers and Caesar Flickerman, you'll write on one of them. Okay? Now, my advice is that you also keep a backup on Word of everything that you write, so that if something goes wrong, what's going to happen is you'll get 5 new prompts. And maybe 2 or 3 of them will be something that you were writing on before. So keep a backup on these things. There's no time limit on it, because if you put a time limit, there's one more thing that can go wrong. Okay? So get in there, sit down a couple hours. Make sure you have the time to do this after you've thought things over. Again, you'll have multiple choices. You will answer at least 1, but no more than 2, in response to the Carbon Diaries, and you'll write 3 or as many of 4 on the Hunger Games. Again, 1 response for each of the 5 questions. Do not do both of them. If you have the first question, write about Rue or let's see the name of Larkin. You're not going to write on Rue and Larkin. You'll write on one or the other and talk about what strikes you as their significance in terms of the central character or larger concerns in the novel. So keep that in mind and then look at those examples from the test. Now, for the final exam, I'll put up very good ones from this test. The same goes with the essay, which is the equivalent of 2 to 2.5 double-spaced pages. The other difference, though, is that unlike the first part 1 of the exams with the prompts, you have to complete it in one sitting. You can do and return to the essay as many times as you want. So again, I suggest you back things up in Word, or you write it out in Word and cut and paste. Make sure that you have discrete paragraphs. I don't want a big jumble that's impossible to read. I want you to space things out so that it can be read. I won't have time for a lot of comments. You'll get a lot of comments on your other essay. Now, I have a series of possibilities for the essay. A character analysis of Laura Brown, for instance, an analysis of her and the conflict she endures. She's 16. She does turn 17 during the book. Her infatuation with Robbie. Note that it doesn't end in hatred or recrimination. It has to do with the reality of the situation. And he's going away. Who knows what's happening tomorrow? and she ends and Adi and she are there. Her interest in the band, but you can do a lot with her in terms of her reactions to these uh, impossible situations and what's going on, especially outside of her. Her inner turmoil is reflected in many ways in the world outside there, in the United States, and the fires and floods and everything that is uh, uh, fires and floods that go on outside of Great Britain and affect Europe. Um, I had carbon diary and contemporary issues. I'm not asking for a screed about, what's going on, but it takes those issues as possibilities. If global warming were real, whether it were man-made or otherwise, this could happen. That great storm then is the scientific catalyst, the nougat, the kernel that starts the novel. Now, of course, it's exaggerated novel. It is comedy. So, of course, the dysfunctional family is just really, really way out there. The woman in the canoe is hilarious and repellent at the same time, as is the principal. Um, and you have the old man, is one of the people you can write about, who is more, if you will, grounded, but he also likes to have a good time. Now, those are just two areas. I put down clothing in the Hunger Games. You can do a lot with clothing, not just with Katniss, but it's connected with Cinna, and it's connected with appearances and reality. Um, Technology in the Hunger Games, including a focus that I didn't write in there, uh, but one of the areas, I mean, you have to narrow things down to something you would do in 2 to 2.5 pages. One of them would be, just media, just the use of the television, and that would tie in with another one, would give just an entire different focus, the significance or the symbolic nature of the Hunger Games themselves. Um, this whole idea of entertainment, and with someone with Caesar Flickerman, it's sort of the idea of the reality shows that are going on, when in the background, where, people are getting blown up in Afghanistan, and there's riots in Egypt and those kinds of things. And so you have Caesar Flickerman, who's like a host for one of those. So that could be in something you're talking about with media. Also surveillance. It comes up, these kinds of issues too, with Snow and Coin. You could do a nice essay on a contrast of, well, it looked like at first a contrast between them, but how they manipulate situations, and this whole idea of the need of security. Um, there's stories like um, the Cory Batros stories. Homeland is the other one, and the first one is Little Brother. They spring out of the Patriot Act and asking, when is enough enough? And I mean, that's a very important issue in the United States that comes up again, is just how much of your personal uh, freedoms are you willing to give up for the comfort of discipline? It's from an article about this, but the idea is that your safety on all different levels. So these come up in many of the dystopian books that you'll read this semester. I mean, it's just because it's so essential to the United States idea of personal freedom and democracy. The British have a different look on things at sometimes. And certainly in their language. At any rate, those are things to be thinking of. The mockingjay as a symbol for revolution. That's connected all the way back with the Jabberjay and the unintended consequences. Uh, and the mockingjay herself is the unintended consequences of putting Katniss Everdeen in this situation. Everything that was used for control turns a different way. Snow and Coin, and the appearance and the reality. I mean, that idea of Peta saying real or not is very much a part of what goes on in the stories. You'll see this coming up with Coin and those. So you can take any of those prompts there for the essay and turn them in ways that fit what you want to do. Now, you can also use them, those prompts, for an essay, for the essay portion of the class. You can also write on feed, and of course another book that will be coming up. I think there are three more in the class. You won't maybe have a chance unless you want to read ahead. You're also more than happy to read an essay of you about the sequel, Carbon Diaries 2017. And you have other stories with two other books too. The Knife of Never Letting Go, for instance, the only one that takes part on another planet. But what you can't do is if you write a contrast between snow and coin, well, comparison, if you will, because what appears to be different turns out to be indeed quite similar. Um, then you're not going to use that for your essay. But other ones, run them by me. More than happy to talk with you about the area that you would go and things along those lines. Now, the essay part and the prompts will be open from early Tuesday morning until midnight Saturday. When you sit down to do the prompts, you have to finish the exam in one sitting. If you And as far as the essay goes, you can work on that pretty much starting today. Uh, I mean, this video will be up a little bit later in the afternoon, this evening. It first has to percolate before I can upload it, but it'll be there on the blog. Um, Later on in the week, I'll put up a brief video for the quiz. The quiz again and the discussion boards will remain open until midnight Monday. I mean, I've given the extended periods here. One, because there's a lot of reading to do. Two, you have an examination. And three, you have a midterm. And there's a holiday. So this will be one of your busiest weeks of the term. Pace yourselves. I think you'll enjoy Feed. Uh, it's a book about possibilities and an ending that it reflects the new kind of turn in YA literature, all the way from Ted Hughes, who did the story of the Iron Giant, and he did one on the Iron Woman, which was about the environment and the need to clean it up. Is the idea, the second generation of children's literature, of what Hughes argued is children deserve to know the truth. Um, let's take even the kind of idea of the language that's used um, in Feed. A lot of people put the book on, you children can't read this because of the language. And the language for that is repulsive to an adult, but also suggests to children this is what you sound like. Um, and and that too is it's to make the youngsters think about the serious issues. There's always going to be, or usually going to be, a kind of a prophylactic around it. But in a lot of the newer ones, and the Hunger Games is one of them, I mean, nothing is certain, and people suffer. Uh, People suffer more in the sequel to Carbon Diaries. It's not as funny as the first one because there's consequences, and you can see outside of Great Britain the horror that the family manages pretty much to escape. Uh, that's the prophylactic of the comedy. Okay, in a comedy, you want everything to turn out right, and really, Carbon Diaries is a comedy. And so in a comedy, there's going to be a kind of a happy ending, even though it's uncertain. But in Feed and the Hunger Games, tragedy comes in, and it's not avoided. It's confronted in ways that the other novels that you're going to read may avoid. It's built into the logic of the stories that the outcome may not be as raw as what happens in Feed, for instance. Uh, so you'll just have to keep that in mind as you're reading. I'm trying to give you a great variety of books, and There's no law that says you have to like every one of them, but I wanted you just to get an idea of the variety, the great varieties of these kinds of novels, and I continue to read them. That's why I was telling you about Cory Doctorow's books, um, and uh, and how they confront these issues. And more authors are turning to the YA area because economically, it's children's books sell more than anything else, and so now you're finding these things. So, well, I didn't. The only thing I didn't do for you was put in a graphic novel. I wanted to make sure everything was easily available in electronic versions, but there are a lot of good ones out there too. Not all of them, though, related to just a YA audience. But they're there, and you might find that these interest you. So keep reading, and do a good job on the examination. Everything's set up for you now, and keep my fingers crossed that you don't run into any problems. And I'll create another video here for you by the end of the week.